Hi there, my name is John Ryeland and I'm the Director of the Christian Healing Mission. And welcome to this particular session of our online training course, Opening Heaven's Door. And every month we want to look at a new topic in this whole question of how we can be better at administering healing to those in need. In this particular session, we're looking at how we can pray for those who are affected by mental health issues. And this whole thing can cause us some anxiety as Prime Ministers. Do we know enough about it? Can we do this? Will I be okay? Is it dangerous? Can I make it worse? Now, to help us in this, I sat down with Jonathan Clark. He's a man I've come to respect enormously in this whole area. He's a director of Premier Lifeline, and he carries with him such a great experience. So I sat down and I talked to him about how he can minister to those who are affected by mental health issues. I want to begin, though, when we talk about, praying for those with mental health issues, is it fair in the first place to have a category like that? Or in one sense, is it just, in a sense, a spectrum and we're all on it somewhere? Or are there those that we could say, well, yes, they are in a separate category because of their illness or their needs?
Well, if I was to say to you, is it fair to say that you pray for people with physical health problems?
Yes.
It's exactly the same thing, where actually there are as many different variations of mental health issues as you would have physical health issues. And there's probably as many people in this country today suffering from aspects of mental health issues as there are physical health issues.
Yes.
Some of them are fairly short-lived, others are long-term.
Yes.
Some will be as a consequence of something traumatic that happens in their life, which would be the equivalent of an injury. Others are the equivalent of a disease.
Okay.
So they've got a whole breadth of conditions that we're talking about. There's no one thing called mental illness.
Right.
Let me explain it in this perspective. My whole working career, whilst I was working in and around the mental health world itself, was based usually working with people who were severely mentally ill or going through a major mental health crisis. And certainly over a number of years, I was regularly seeing people who were severely mentally ill, needing quite intensive work. In that setting, one can get so used to seeing the severely mentally ill that you forget that all of us have the potential of having mental health issues.
Sure.
And so you end up with that hard end as being your norm, and actually you lose touch with actually we all have issues which affect our mental well-being.
Yes.
When I first heard the statistic that 1 in 4 people in the UK will have some form of mental health problem in a year that might require them to see a GP or potentially see a GP about their mental health, I was always very sceptical about it. And I know lots of people are incredibly sceptical about that sort of statistic.
Yeah.
However, the more I've looked at it over the years, the more I see that as being not only realistic, but if anything, an understatement, not an overstatement.
Right.
Because what it does is it's basically saying that each of us is body, soul and spirit. Each of us can have things which affect us in our bodies physically, but also in our soul, in our mind, in our emotions and all of those aspects. And it's just as likely, just as common that we can be affected in that as we would be in our bodies.
Okay.
And therefore the 1 in 4, put that in comparison to what proportion of the population might either see their GP about a physical health problem in a year, or potentially could see their GP about a physical health problem in a year, and that would certainly probably be 1 in 4 or more. And in a sense, that puts that into the perspective.
Sure.
Having said that, there are some conditions in the mental health spectrum which are severe, long-term, and potentially life-threatening. And some of those would be the equivalent of some of the long-term conditions that you'd have in the physical health world, which we may come on to later.
Okay. I guess it's probably true that there is a fear about this. And we I think some folk are naturally fearful about praying for those with mental health issues. Why might that be?
Well, over the years, one of the things I often do when I'm training people is to actually get people to think about what words are used to actually describe mental health problems or people with mental health problems. And in the English language, there is no end of different words or phrases which have accumulated over the last however many 100 years to actually describe people with mental health problems. It's enormous.
Yes.
And you start thinking...
Some helpful, some not so helpful.
Some are helpful, which are the diagnostic ones.
Yes.
Some are the ones which were diagnostic ones, which then became loaded and then were replaced by other things.
Sure.
A lot of them are just terms where people are struggling to come to terms with or understand, make sense of, or even make light of things that they see in other people which they can't cope with. They don't know what it is. They try to explain or just describe what they see.
Yes.
And the English language has this enormous number of words. Believe me, if I was to start reading out a list, I'd probably be here for the next 10 minutes.
Sure.
So actually there is something about mental health issues. And part of it is an issue about understanding.
Yes.
It's something strange. It's not something which can be easily understood. If you've got an injury on your arm, you've got a broken hand or a sprained leg, or you've got a cut or whatever it is, you actually can see it.
Sure.
And in fact, with a lot of physical health problems, you can actually see it, whether sort of through normal, just visible things, or actually sort of through diagnostic type thing tools. But when it comes to mental health, it changes people's behaviour and their personalities and how they respond to you and how they live their lives. And that sort of strangeness, that sort of change, people have to then come to terms with. Right. And then it's a question of where's this from, what's happening to them, is it going to affect me, is it catching? There's a whole range of thoughts that come through. Are they going to be dangerous?
Yes.
Am I at risk here? Is it inherited? So in fact, if it's my parents...
But what would you say to that? So, I mean, is it dangerous? Am I going to be harmed? Might they be violent? But what would you say to somebody who might be thinking that?
Statistically, most people with any form of mental health problem are no more dangerous than anyone else in the country.
Sure. Okay.
There are certain conditions where if it's untreated, it may raise the risk of that person being a danger.
Yes.
More often to themselves, but sometimes to others.
Right.
Those conditions are usually treatable, and as long as the person's on their medication, they can be brought back to being statistically no more dangerous than anyone else.
Fine.
In my whole career of working with people with mental health problems, I've probably been no more afraid of the people I've worked with than some of the other people I've met in other circumstances in life.
Okay. So, I mean, fear is not there's no need to fear. That's not something we need to worry about in the session.
And if you are afraid, if someone is behaving particularly strangely, bizarrely, threateningly, then there is that question of actually that's the time when you probably really do need to bring in the professionals to assess.
Yes.
And often that would be when I would be seeing people to see if they were going through an acute phase of one of the conditions they were suffering from, whether they needed to be treated with medication, whether or not they needed to be admitted to hospital, either for their own protection or protection of others.
Okay.
The law is in place to respond to that. The medication and the treatments are there.
Okay.
And we need to be aware of when we feel that the situation is beyond what we can cope with.
Right.
We do not, in a church, have to, or any pastoral setting, have to contain everything all of the time. Sometimes we need to know our limitations.
Okay. Now, given then that this is, as you were saying, quite a wide-scale issue, but given that we are the average Prime Minister in a church who is probably going to be ministering to people with mental health issues, are there any different, in a sense, do's and don'ts as there would be, say, to the damaged arm or the broken hand? Are there different ways that you would approach ministry, or different things you'd say don't do?
I think one of the temptations is to simply say to people, pull yourself together,
Sure.
get over it, pray about it, and or deal with whatever's, deal with the sin of depression, or deal with this. There's so many things I've been told over the years. And basically, we need to be realistic. If someone is struggling with problems of their mental health, their emotional well-being, they need as much love and care and support as someone with a physical illness. It may be different in the way it's needed, but they need that support rather than being put on a guilt trip.
What do you mean it might be different in the way it's needed?
Well, what I mean is this. Sometimes a lot of people get themselves into a situation where they feel they have to fix things.
Yes.
And so the automatic thing is, if someone's got a broken arm, you need to take them to the hospital, get it strapped up, do this, do that.
Sure.
But actually, if someone's struggling with certain aspects of mental health issues, they're under stress, anxiety, fear, they're depressed, or that sort of thing, what we need to do is to actually be there for them and actually try to learn from them what is needed to help them at that particular time. Yes, prayer is important. Yes, actually encouraging them to know that God is there. But even some of the most respected, don't only use the word saints in history, have struggled with mental health issues. Leading Christian preachers in the past have struggled with mental health issues. And these are people who know the Bible through and through, are seen as some of the best teachers ever, highly respected, and yet at certain points in their lives have struggled with severe mental health problems. For example, Spurgeon. Spurgeon of his era was highly respected, not just by the people who came to faith through him or others who were involved in the ministry at the time, but the Prime Minister, the royalty, he had the respect of people in the highest echelons of society. And in that sense, probably, and I have known other people compare him to, in a sense he was the Billy Graham of his day, in the same way that some people would say Wesley was of his day. Now, at a certain point in his life, something happened which triggered depression. He went through some really bleak, dark days, through difficult places. But in that, God met him where he was and went through it with him. It's almost the equivalent of the passage which talks about Jonah and what his experience was when he was inside the sea creature and crying out from the depths. And if you think about some of the Psalms where the psalm writers talk about how they're feeling as they're going through those darkest, deepest places. Or Psalm 23, as I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. That's the sort of experience that he was experiencing. And rather than being told, come out of it,
Step out of it.
It's a question of helping the person go through it. And God worked with him through it. And he came out to the point where, at a point later, he could look back and see where he had been and where God was taking him forward.
So the love, the support, that sense of walking with people through what they're going through. What other do's and don'ts would there be?
Well, the key thing, and in fact I used that as a title for a talk when we did a conference together many years ago, is being there. Do not try to fix someone. It's not the fix-it mentality, which so many of us feel that we have to sort the person out. And if we don't get them sorted out with a prayer or a Bible passage or this, we failed. We've got to actually recognise that we need to be there to allow God to work within them.
So the very fact of simply sitting with somebody is in itself a ministry that is good and wonderful.
Absolutely. And maybe making sure that they are fed.
Yes.
looked after, that they've got company if they need company, that they've got someone to talk to, they need someone to talk to.
Yes.
For someone, if I was in a situation where I'd experienced what Spurgeon had experienced, and sadly in my life something happened many years ago which was incredibly traumatic and had a long-term effect on me. If I'd had someone alongside me just to be able to talk through what had happened and its effect on me, that would have been so important, because it actually helps you to process and deal with and come to terms with what's happened.
Yes.
At the time, because of the circumstances, not only did I feel responsible for the tragic thing that happened, but I also was, in a sense, put on a guilt trip by all that was happening afterwards. It was only later that I went for prayer ministry, and I was actually given the opportunity to talk through and work through what happened, how I felt about it, and how God wanted to actually bring healing to that place of trauma that I'd experienced.
Okay. Our particular approach to ministry at CHM is very much based on seeking first to seek to soak people in the Father's love for them,
Yes.
and then to encourage as far as we can an engagement with the presence of Jesus, rather than just praying for an issue. Is there any reason why those, or some of those that are facing mental health issues, would find it more difficult to engage with the Father's love or the presence of Jesus? Or does that actually depend upon where they are in the spectrum of mental health issues?
And even if a person has got a diagnosis of one of the severe mental illnesses where they are on quite high doses of medication, it doesn't stop them being able to respond to the love and care and being given that sense that they matter.
Do you think that when we are praying for people, are we worse at seeing people as a diagnosis if it's of a mental health issue than a physical issue, do you think?
I think so.
Yes.
I think part of us become more potentially alarmed at the diagnosis.
And so that's what I see the diagnosis.
Yeah.
And it's, crumbs, what to do. It's a diagnosis,
absolutely.
not a person.
And often people become described by it. If you whether you're in the mental health world or actually out in the community or in churches, often you'll have people talked about as this is the alcoholic,
Yes.
or the schizophrenic,
Yes.
or the self-harmer.
Not Pete or George. Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Why do we do that?
Because we're seeing the problem, not the person. We're seeing what we perceive as being why they need help or what their issue is, rather than actually seeing the person underneath it. And it's very important to actually see the person.
And so in all these, we're talking about do's and don'ts, the most important do is do see the person. Don't just see a diagnosis.
Absolutely. And actually learn from the person what their needs are. Because from a point of view of working within a church setting and offering someone pastoral care, or trying to actually adjust what the church does to actually accommodate, meet the needs of a range of different people, you actually need to learn what they want. Don't think, I'll do this for the people with mental health problems, because actually there's no one group. No. Each person is an individual. But on top of that, some people with mental health problems will find coming to a service which is quiet and contemplative is what they need. Yes. Others are able to lose themselves in a noisy service, partly because actually they are not noticed. Others will actually creep in at the beginning of the first hymn, knowing that they won't have to speak to someone, and will creep out at the final prayer, because actually what they can't cope with on that particular day is the social
interaction. Sure. Okay.
So different people have different needs. What the important thing is to actually learn where they are at any one time, and be observant to see what changes there are, but also meet them where they are. It's that thing about, rather than making them cross the bridge to you, that you cross the bridge to where they are, And in fact, if they need to cross the bridge, help them to cross the bridge with you.
And we can only really do that when we see the value in that person.
Absolutely.
That this person is a real person, that they're not the downers, and they matter deeply to God. Yes.
At which point, what we need to be doing is saying in our prayers to God, to Jesus, God, show me how you see this person.
Yes.
Not how I see them,
Yes.
or how I'm told the
Yes.
psychiatrists see them, or any of those things. Lord God, show me how you see this person.
So, to summarise, I suppose, listening to you, the main thing I think that I've got out of this is, when you're with someone, see the person.
Absolutely.
Don't see the condition. See the person and love the person, because that's what God does.
Definitely. And recognise that mental health issues, emotional well-being issues are normal.
Yes.
They are part of the stuff of life.
Yes.
They are as common as experiencing physical health problems.
Yes.
And there are as many different types of them.
Yes.
They are normal. They happen. They
Yes.
happen to Christians as much as non-Christians. It is not a sign of the state of your spiritual life. It is just the impact of the stuff of life.
So when we're ministering, look at the person.
Absolutely.
Jonathan, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I actually found it so encouraging, actually very releasing, that my main task is not to come up with a diagnosis or anything like that, but it's simply to sit with people and to love them for who they are, and to share something of their journey with them. Now, if you've enjoyed this and you want to take it a bit further, if you go to our website, healingmission.org, there are details there of how you can join in our online discussion forum, just to try and talk about this a bit more. Well, until then, take care.